I never imagined our 10th wedding anniversary would end up being the night that changed my life forever. You see, when my husband Robert stood up to make his toast at the Heritage Room of the Windsor Hotel, surrounded by 50 of our closest friends and family, I thought he was about to share one of his characteristically charming speeches about our decade of marriage. Instead, he raised his crystal champagne flute, looked me dead in the eyes, and announced our divorce to everyone present. But what he didn't know was that I had already uncovered his plans, and I had a few surprises of my own prepared for that evening. Let me take you back to how it all began, to the events that led to that fateful October evening in Boston. The morning of our anniversary started like any other successful day in my life. I woke up at 5 a.m., just as the autumn sun was beginning to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold over the harbor. The familiar scent of freshly ground coffee filled our Beacon Hill brownstone as I prepared for what I knew would be the most important day of my life, though not for the reasons anyone else suspected. I stood in front of the antique mirror in our master bathroom, carefully applying my makeup, each stroke of the brush like armor being painted on for battle. My reflection showed a woman who had come so far from her humble beginnings, Jennifer Mitchell, the girl who started with a food truck and built it into the Harvest and Root restaurant group, now one of Boston's most successful culinary empires. 5 restaurants across the city, each one more successful than the last, and our new flagship location downtown was just weeks away from its grand opening. The irony wasn't lost on me that exactly 10 years ago, I had stood in front of a different mirror, preparing for what I thought would be the happiest day of my life. My wedding to Robert Anderson, third-generation real estate developer and Boston's golden boy. Back then, I had been so in love, so naive, believing that his family had truly accepted the food truck girl who dared to dream big. If only I had known then what I discovered 3 weeks ago. Rob was still asleep when I left the house that morning. I had a full day planned, meetings with suppliers, a final tasting at the new restaurant, and most importantly, a secret meeting with Marcus Thompson, our family lawyer. Well, my lawyer now. The weight of the manila envelope he had given me last week felt heavy in my designer handbag, but not as heavy as the knowledge it contained. The morning flew by in a whirlwind of activity. My best friend and head chef, Sophie Chen, kept shooting me concerned glances as we went through the tasting menu for the new restaurant. She was one of only 3 people who knew what was really going to happen tonight. "Are you sure about this, Jenny?" she asked for the 100th time as we sampled her new autumn squash risotto. "You know, once you do this, there's no going back." I placed my spoon down carefully, dabbing my lips with a napkin before responding. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Soph. They thought they could blindside me, humiliate me in front of everyone we know. But they forgot one thing. I didn't get where I am by being naive anymore." My sister Amanda called just as I was leaving the restaurant. "Everything's in place," she said, her marketing executive efficiency coming through even over the phone. "Marcus has all the paperwork ready, and I've got the digital presentations queued up if needed." I could hear her hesitate before adding, "Pat's been calling me all morning, trying to confirm the seating arrangements for tonight. She's up to something, Jenny." Of course my mother-in-law was up to something. Patricia Anderson had been up to something from the day her precious son brought home a woman who dared to make her own money instead of simply inheriting it. For 10 years, I had played the perfect daughter-in-law, smiling through her backhanded compliments and subtle digs about my background. But Pat had finally overplayed her hand, and I had the proof sitting in that manila envelope. I spent the afternoon at the salon, getting my hair and nails done, playing the role of the excited wife celebrating a decade of marriage. My stylist worked my dark hair into elegant waves, and I chose a deep burgundy for my nails, the color of the wine Robert would choke on later that night. The dress I had chosen for the evening was a masterpiece in midnight blue silk, elegant, but powerful. When I slipped it on later that evening, I felt invincible. Robert finally emerged from his home office when I was putting the finishing touches on my makeup. He came up behind me, placing his hands on my shoulders, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of us in the mirror, the perfect power couple. If you didn't look too closely, you might miss the slight insincerity in his smile, the way his fingers gripped just a little too tight. "You look beautiful, darling," he said, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "Tonight's going to be unforgettable." If he noticed how I stiffened slightly at his touch, he didn't show it. He was too caught up in his own performance, too confident in his plan. "Yes," I replied, meeting his eyes in the mirror with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "It certainly will be." The Heritage Room at the Windsor Hotel was stunning that evening. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the space, and the October sunset painted the harbor in shades of orange and purple through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I had to admit, Pat had outdone herself with the decorations. White roses and burgundy dahlias covered every surface, and the table settings were immaculate. Everything perfect for her son's grand performance. Guests began arriving at 7, and I played my part flawlessly. I hugged friends, laughed at jokes, accepted congratulations with gracious smiles. My sister Amanda arrived early, as planned, immediately taking up position near the audio-visual equipment that had been set up for the evening's speeches. Sophie came straight from the restaurant, still in her chef's whites, apologizing for not having time to change, all part of the plan. I watched Patricia Anderson work the room like the social empress she was, air-kissing cheeks and holding court among Boston's elite. She had organized this whole evening, supposedly as a gift to celebrate our 10th anniversary. I caught her, eye across the room, and she gave me one of her signature smiles, the kind that could freeze the harbor in July. The dinner service began promptly at 8. Course after course of exquisite food, though not from any of my restaurants. Pat had made sure of that, insisting on using her preferred caterer instead. I barely tasted any of it, my stomach too knotted with anticipation. I could feel the weight of the envelope in my clutch, now transferred from my handbag. The papers inside were burning a hole in the silk, just waiting for their moment. Finally, as the dessert plates were being cleared away, Robert stood up, gently tapping his spoon against his champagne flute. The crystal rang out across the room, and conversations died down as 50 pairs of eyes turned to focus on my husband. I took a slow sip of my water, keeping my face carefully neutral. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Robert began, his voice carrying that smooth confidence that had helped him close so many real estate deals. "It means the world to have all our closest friends and family here to celebrate this milestone with Jennifer and me." I watched him as he spoke, noting how his left hand stayed in his pocket, probably fingering the speech cards I knew he'd prepared. He was good. I had to give him that. He hit all the right notes, amusing anecdotes about our early days together. That story about our honeymoon in Tuscany that always made everyone laugh, the proud husband bragging about his wife's success. And then, right on cue, his tone changed. "However," he said, his voice taking on a more serious note, "tonight isn't just about celebrating the past 10 years. It's about honesty, about new beginnings." He turned to face me directly, and I could see in his eyes that he was savoring what he thought would be his moment of triumph. "Jennifer, you've been an amazing partner in so many ways, but sometimes two people simply grow in different directions." The room had gone completely silent. I could feel the tension rising as our guests started to realize this wasn't a typical anniversary speech. From the corner of my eye, I saw Patricia straighten in her seat, a small, satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Everything was going according to their plan. "And so," Robert continued, raising his glass higher, "I'd like to make a toast. To new beginnings, to honesty, and to the next chapter of our lives, separately. I'm filing for divorce." The collective gasp from our guests was audible. I could see phones being lowered beneath tables, no doubt texting the news to those who hadn't made the guest list. Various expressions of shock, dismay, and, from some of Robert's friends, poorly concealed amusement played across faces around the room. Everyone waited for my reaction, expecting tears, shock, perhaps a scene. Patricia was practically vibrating, with anticipation, ready to play the sympathetic mother-in-law comforting her poor son who had been forced to take such drastic measures. Instead, I smiled. The silence in the heritage room was deafening as I slowly rose from my seat, smoothing the silk of my midnight blue dress. The weight of 50 pairs of eyes bore into me, waiting for the tears, the hysteria, the scene they all expected. Patricia Anderson's satisfied smirk grew wider as she reached for her designer clutch, no doubt ready to pull out a pristinely folded handkerchief for her devastated daughter-in-law's imminent breakdown.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
I let the silence stretch for a moment longer, savoring the tension. The gentle clink of ice settling in water glasses seemed thunderous in the quiet room. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Boston Harbor lights twinkled against the darkening October sky, witnesses to the drama unfolding in this elegant dining room. "What an interesting toast, Robert," I finally said, my voice steady and clear. I picked up my own champagne flute, untouched until this moment. "But I think you've forgotten something rather important about timing." I took a deliberate sip, letting the bubbles dance on my tongue before continuing. "You see, you can't divorce me." I paused, watching his confident smile start to waver. "Because I filed for divorce 3 weeks ago." Now it was Robert's turn to freeze, his champagne glass suspended halfway to his lips. The look of confusion that crossed his face was almost comical. The expression of a man who had just realized his carefully orchestrated performance had been upstaged. "That's impossible," Patricia cut in, her perfectly manicured hand gripping the edge of the table. "You're lying. Robert would have been notified." I turned to my mother-in-law, allowing myself to finally drop the mask of dutiful daughter-in-law I'd worn for 10 years. "Oh, Pat," I said, my voice dripping with false sympathy. "You really should have taught your son to read his mail more carefully instead of having his assistant sort through it. Those certified letters from Marcus Thompson's office weren't just routine business correspondence." The mention of Marcus's name sent a visible shockwave through both Robert and Patricia. Marcus Thompson had been the Anderson family's lawyer for 20 years, and now he was exclusively mine. I could see Robert's mind racing, probably trying to remember every conversation he'd had with Marcus over the past few months, wondering how much I knew. "Marcus would never betray us like that," Robert finally managed, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "He's been our family lawyer since before we met." "Exactly," I replied, reaching for my clutch, "which means he was there when you and your mother started moving assets around 3 months ago. He was there when you began setting up shell companies to hide money from what you thought would be our eventual divorce settlement. And most importantly," I pulled out the manila envelope, "he was there when you started conspiring with my head supplier to tank my new restaurant's opening." A flash of guilt crossed Robert's face before he could hide it. Around the room, murmurs began to ripple through our gathered guests. I noticed several of Boston's other prominent restaurateurs leaning forward in their seats, suddenly very interested in what I had to say. "Jenny," Robert tried, switching tactics, his voice taking on that soothing tone he used when trying to close difficult deals. "You're obviously upset. Why don't we take this somewhere private and..." "Private?" I cut him off with a laugh that held no humor. "Like this was supposed to be private? You arranged this entire evening, filled this room with everyone we know, just so you could humiliate me publicly. Well, darling, if you wanted an audience, let's give them a real show." I opened the envelope and began laying out documents on the table in front of me. "These are copies of emails between you and James Morrison, my primary food supplier. Fascinating reading, really. Especially the part where you offered to buy his company out from under him if he agreed to sabotage my deliveries for the new restaurant's opening night." The color drained from Robert's face as I continued. But James has worked with me since I had nothing but a food truck. His loyalty isn't for sale, unlike yours, apparently. I turned to address our captive audience. Would anyone like to know what else I found? That's enough! Patricia stood up so quickly her chair scraped against the hardwood floor with a harsh screech. I will not sit here and listen to these ridiculous accusations against my son. Sit down, Pat, I said quietly, but with enough steel in my voice to make her pause. Sit down, or I'll tell everyone about the real estate fraud you helped Robert commit last year with the waterfront development project. Patricia sank back into her chair as if her legs had given out. Several of Robert's business associates exchanged worried glances. They'd all invested heavily in that project. You don't know what you're talking about, Robert interjected, but... His voice had lost its smooth confidence. Sweat was beginning to bead on his forehead despite the room's perfect temperature control. Don't I? I pulled out my phone and pulled up a series of photos. These were taken 2 months ago at the St. Regis. That's you, isn't it? Meeting with the city planning commissioner? The same commissioner who mysteriously approved your permit applications in record time? I swiped to the next photo. And look, there's your mother having lunch with Mrs. Henderson the very next day. Mrs. Henderson, whose environmental impact report on the project was surprisingly favorable despite significant concerns from other experts. The room had gone from shocked silence to electric tension. I could practically hear careers crumbling around me, but I wasn't done yet. Of course, none of that would have mattered if you hadn't already sold pre-construction units to your investors at inflated prices using falsified market research data. I laid out another document. Data that, coincidentally, was created by a consulting firm owned by your cousin Thomas, the same cousin who's been helping you hide money in offshore accounts. You had me investigated? Robert's voice cracked slightly, disbelief warring with growing panic in his eyes. No, darling, I had you exposed. I straightened up, letting my gaze sweep across the room. You see, while you and Pat were so busy planning my public humiliation, you forgot something crucial about me. I built my business from nothing, starting with a food truck and a dream. I learned very early on to watch for signs of trouble, to protect myself, to always have a backup plan. I could see Sophie in the corner, filming everything on her phone. My sister Amanda stood by the AV equipment, ready with the digital presentation. We wouldn't even need now. Robert and Patricia's faces had said everything necessary. I've spent 10 years watching you and your mother look down on me, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. 10 years of enduring Pat's snide comments about my background, my business, my choices. 10 years of you taking credit for my success in your social circles while secretly resenting that I built something of my own instead of just playing the proper society wife. Jennifer, please, Robert tried one last time, but I held up my hand to stop him. I know about Rebecca, I said quietly, and watched him physically recoil. Patricia made a small, choking sound. Yes, Pat, I know about her too. I know about the apartment you helped him set up for her in Beacon Hill, 3 blocks from my new restaurant location. Was that your idea of a joke? The shocked gasps from our audience confirmed that this particular piece of information hadn't been common knowledge. I saw several of Boston's most prominent socialites already typing furiously on their phones. By morning, the Anderson family's carefully cultivated reputation would be in shambles. You both thought you were so clever, I continued, gathering the documents back into my envelope with steady hands. Planning this grand gesture, this public humiliation. You thought you'd strip me of my dignity along with my marriage, maybe even force me to sell my restaurants to cover the divorce settlement you thought I'd have to pay you. I laughed softly. Instead, you've given me exactly what I needed. Witnesses. I gestured to the room at large. Everyone here has now seen evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and attempt to sabotage a competitor's business. I'm sure the SEC will be very interested in the waterfront development situation, not to mention your investors." "You wouldn't dare," Patricia hissed, but her usual imperial confidence had cracked completely. "You'll ruin everything." "No, Pat. You and Robert did that yourselves. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." I picked up my champagne glass again. "So yes, let's make a toast. To new beginnings, to justice, and to the truth finally coming to light." I took a sip of champagne, then set the glass down, with a decisive clink. "Oh, and Robert? Don't bother going home tonight. The locks have been changed and security has been instructed not to let you in. You can collect your things tomorrow, after my lawyers have finished documenting everything. Of course." The room erupted in chaos as I turned and walked toward the door, my heels clicking steadily on the hardwood floor. Behind me, I could hear Patricia's shrill voice trying to regain control of the situation, Robert's increasingly desperate attempts to reach his business partners, and the rising tide of gossip and speculation from our guests. Just before I reached the exit, I paused and turned back one last time. "Pat, thank you for arranging such a lovely evening. The flowers really are beautiful, though personally, I would have chosen peonies instead of roses. They symbolize prosperity and honor, you see. But then again, I suppose those wouldn't have been appropriate tonight." With that parting shot, I walked out of the heritage room with my head high, leaving behind the wreckage of Robert and Patricia's carefully laid plans. As the heavy door swung shut behind me, I heard Sophie's voice ring out clearly, and I have all of that on video. In the elegant lobby of the Windsor Hotel, I finally allowed myself to take a deep breath. My hands were shaking slightly as I pulled out my phone to text Marcus. The message was simple. "It's done. Start the proceedings." The reply came almost instantly. "Already on it. Well done, Jenny. Meet tomorrow at 9 a.m. to go over next steps?" I sent back a quick confirmation, then looked up to see Amanda and Sophie hurrying toward me, both wearing expressions that mixed concern with fierce pride. "That was amazing," Amanda said, pulling me into a tight hug. "I thought Pat was going to have a stroke when you mentioned the waterfront development project." "Are you okay?" Sophie asked, still holding her phone with the damning footage. "Do you need a drink? Because I know a place." She winked, referring to my own bar at the flagship restaurant. I looked at my two closest confidants and felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. "I'm better than okay," I replied, surprising myself with how true it was. "I'm free." The three of us made our way out of the hotel into the crisp October night. Behind us, the Heritage Room was still buzzing with the aftermath of what would surely become one of Boston's most talked-about social scandals. But as we walked toward the waiting car, I found I didn't care about the gossip or the drama anymore. I had spent 10 years of my life trying to fit into the Anderson family's world, trying to prove I was worthy of their acceptance. Tonight, I had finally realized that their approval had never been worth having in the first place. I had built something real, something honest, while they had built their empire on lies and manipulation. As we drove through the nighttime streets of Boston toward my restaurant, I looked out at the city lights reflecting off the harbor. Somewhere in that glittering darkness was my original food truck location, where it had all started. Tomorrow, I would wake up in my own home, free from Robert's presence and Patricia's influence, and continue building my dream. But this time, entirely on my own terms. The night wasn't over yet, though. There was a bottle of vintage champagne waiting in my office. Real champagne, not the overpriced domestic sparkling wine Patricia had insisted on serving tonight. And as I sat with my sister and my best friend, watching the city lights twinkle against the dark water, I realized that sometimes the end of one dream is just the beginning of a better one. I raised my glass to my own reflection in the car window. "To new beginnings," I whispered, and meant it with all my heart. The morning after the anniversary dinner dawned crisp and clear over Boston Harbor. I sat in my office at the flagship restaurant of Harvest and Root, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. The newspapers hadn't hit the stands yet, but my phone had been buzzing since dawn with messages from concerned friends who had witnessed last night's events. I left them all unread. Marcus Thompson arrived precisely at 9, carrying his signature leather briefcase and 2 cups of coffee from my cafe downstairs. He looked immaculate as always in his tailored suit, though the slight shadows under his eyes suggested he'd had a long night preparing the next phase of our strategy. "I trust you slept well?" he asked, setting 1 coffee in front of me. The familiar aroma of my own house blend was oddly comforting after the chaos of the previous evening. "Better than I have in years," I replied honestly, taking a sip. "Though, I suspect Robert and Patricia haven't closed their eyes yet." Marcus allowed himself a small smile as he began laying out documents on my desk. "Indeed, I received 17 messages from Robert's new lawyer overnight. Apparently, they're quite concerned about the evidence you mentioned at dinner." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the smooth leather against my silk blouse. "How concerned should they be?" "Very." Marcus pulled out a thick folder. "The SEC has already expressed interest in the waterfront development project. 3 of Robert's major investors contacted my office first thing this morning, wanting to review their contracts, and..." He paused for effect. "Mrs. Henderson from the Environmental Board has suddenly developed a very detailed memory about her lunch with Patricia." The sound of the early morning prep team working in the kitchen below drifted up through my office window. The familiar rhythm of chopping, the clatter of pots and pans, the calls of behind and corner. This was my world, built from scratch, and no one could take it from me now. "Sophie sent over the video from last night," Marcus continued, pulling out his tablet. "The quality is excellent. Robert's face when you mentioned Rebecca." He shook his head admiringly. "I don't suppose you'd tell me how you found out. About her?" I smiled, remembering the moment 3 weeks ago when everything had fallen into place. "Let's just say Robert should have been more careful about which jewelry store he used. The sales assistant who sold him that emerald necklace? She's a regular at my Back Bay location. Recognized him immediately." The intercom buzzed, and my assistant's voice came through. "Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Anderson is in the lobby. He's demanding to see you." I exchanged glances with Marcus. This was earlier than we'd expected, but we were prepared. "Send him up, Marie, and call security to stand by, please." Robert burst into my office moments later, looking decidedly worse for wear. His usually perfectly pressed suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled. The confident real estate mogul from last night was gone, replaced by a desperate man watching his carefully constructed world crumble. "How dare you?" he snarled, stalking toward my desk. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The calls I've been getting all morning?" I didn't rise from my chair. "Good morning, Robert. I see you're not handling public humiliation as gracefully as you expected me to." He slammed his hands down on my desk, making the coffee cups rattle. "This isn't a game, Jennifer. The SEC? The investors? Do you want to destroy everything?" "Everything?" I repeated softly, dangerously. "You mean like you were planning to destroy everything I've built? Tell me, what was the plan after your little toast last night? Force me to sell my restaurants to pay your inflated divorce settlement? Watch me crawl back to that food truck while you and Rebecca enjoyed the spoils?" Robert blanched at Rebecca's name. That's not what you expected me to know about," I finished for him. "You know what your biggest mistake was, Robert? Not the affair, not the fraud, not even the attempt to sabotage my business." I stood up slowly, placing my palms flat on the desk. "Your biggest mistake was underestimating me. Still thinking of me as that naive girl with a food truck who was so grateful to be accepted into your privileged world. Marcus cleared his throat quietly. Mr. Anderson, I should advise you that this conversation is being recorded, and security is on their way up. Robert's head whipped around as if he'd only just noticed Marcus's presence. You treacherous bastard, he spat. After everything my family's done for you. After everything your family's done? I cut in. You mean like using him to hide? Your illegal activities? Involving him in your schemes without considering his professional reputation? Marcus has spent 20 years building his practice. Did you think he'd risk that to help you commit fraud? The door opened again, and 2 security guards entered quietly, positioning themselves near Robert. Their presence seemed to deflate him slightly, though the anger still simmered in his eyes. What do you want? He finally asked, his voice hoarse. Money? Is that it? Name your price. I laughed, and the sound seemed to startle him. Oh, Robert, I don't want your money. I have my own. What I want is justice. I nodded to Marcus, who slid a document across the desk. This is a comprehensive list of all the evidence we have. The fraud, the affair, the conspiracy to sabotage my business, everything. You have 2 choices. Robert picked up the paper, with trembling hands. As he read, the little color remaining in his face drained away. Option 1, I continued, my voice steady. You and Patricia publicly admit to everything. Make full restitution to your investors, face the consequences of your actions, and leave me and my business alone forever. And option 2? He asked, though from his tone, he already knew he wouldn't like it. Option 2 is I release everything. Every email, every photo, every recorded conversation. The SEC gets their investigation, your investors get their lawsuit, and Boston society gets the scandal of the decade. I smiled coldly. I'm sure Rebecca would love to see her name splashed across the Herald's front page. Robert sank into one of my office chairs, the paper crumpling in his grip. You wouldn't. The scandal would hurt you too. Would it? I gestured around my office. I'm the wronged wife who exposed her husband's corruption, the self-made woman who stood up to old money corruption. Do you really think my customers will care about your scandal when they're too busy admiring my integrity? The morning sun had fully risen now, streaming through the windows and illuminating the space between us. The gulf that had always existed, but that I'd only recently stopped trying to bridge. You have until noon to decide, I said firmly. After that, Marcus starts making phone calls. My mother will never agree to this, Robert muttered, but the fight had gone out of his voice. Then I suggest you find a way to convince her. Perhaps remind her that the statute of limitations hasn't expired on certain real estate deals from the past decade. I nodded to the security guards. Please escort Mr. Anderson out. He's not to be allowed back in any of our locations. As Robert was led away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Marcus began gathering his papers. Nicely handled, he commented, though I suspect Patricia won't go down without a fight. I'm counting on it, I replied, turning to look out over the harbor. In fact, I'd be disappointed if she didn't try something dramatic. Right on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Pat's just arrived at the new restaurant location. She's demanding to speak with the contractor. I smiled, picking up my bag. Right on schedule. Care to join me for round 2, Marcus? The drive to the downtown location took 15 minutes, during which I received confirmation that Patricia had already threatened the contractor, attempted to bribe the head electrician, and tried to access the kitchen where the new equipment was being installed. We found her in the main dining room, her designer suit slightly askew, gesturing wildly at my construction foreman. The space was still under renovation, sawdust coating the floor and plastic sheeting covering the windows. But even in its unfinished state, you could see how magnificent it would be. You can't just ignore me, Patricia was saying as we walked in. Do you know who I am in this city? Someone who's trespassing on private property, I answered for the foreman. Thank you, John. I'll handle this. Patricia spun around, her face flushed with anger. "You little upstart! How dare you turn my son against me? After everything we've done for you." "Done for me?" I repeated, my voice echoing slightly in the unfinished space. "Let's talk about what you've done for me, Pat. Was it the constant reminders about my background? The subtle sabotage of my business connections? Or perhaps you mean the time you tried to convince Robert I was unfaithful because you saw me having lunch with my produce supplier?" "I was protecting my son," she shot back. "You never deserved him. You never belonged in our world." "Your world?" I gestured around the construction site. "You mean the world of lies, fraud, and manipulation?" "You're right, I never belonged there. I was too busy building something real." Patricia took a step toward me, but stopped when she noticed Marcus recording everything on his phone. "You think you've won, don't you? One little dramatic scene at dinner and you think you can destroy what the Andersons have built over generations? No, Pat. You and Robert managed that destruction all on your own. I'm just making sure everyone knows why the empire fell." I moved closer, lowering my voice. "Tell me something. Did you help him set up the apartment for Rebecca, or was that beneath your dignity?" The look of pure hatred that crossed her face was almost beautiful in its intensity. "You have no proof of anything." "That's where you're wrong." I pulled out my phone and played a short audio clip, Patricia's own voice discussing the falsified environmental report with Mrs. Henderson. "I have proof of everything." The color drained from her face as she recognized the conversation. "How?" "Did you really think Mrs. Henderson's assistant was loyal to you just because you got her son into that private school? She's been catering events at my restaurants for years." I stopped the recording. "I have dozens more like this. Every lunch meeting, every phone call, every backroom deal." "What do you want?" Patricia's voice had lost its imperious tone, replaced by something closer to fear. "The same thing I told Robert. A public admission of everything. Full restitution. And for both of you to disappear from my life forever." "You'll destroy us," she whispered. "No, Pat. I'm giving you a chance to salvage something from the wreckage. Take the deal or everything comes out." I checked my watch. "You have 2 hours left to decide. I suggest you talk to Robert." Patricia's shoulders slumped, the fight finally leaving her. Without another word, she turned and walked out, her heels clicking unevenly on the dusty floor. Marcus waited until she was gone before speaking. "You know they'll try something else." "Of course they will," I replied, running my hand along the smooth maple of what would soon be my new bar. "But they've lost their power over me. Whatever they try next will just dig their hole deeper." I walked to the front window and pulled back the plastic sheeting, letting the morning sunlight stream in. Below, I could see Patricia getting into her car, phone already pressed to her ear. No doubt she was calling Robert, trying to find a way out of the trap they'd laid for themselves. But I wasn't worried. I had truth on my side, and after 10 years of playing by their rules, I was finally free to play by my own. The deadline would come and go. Decisions would be made. And whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would never again let anyone make me feel small. I turned back to the unfinished restaurant, seeing not the construction site it was, but the triumph it would become. "Let's get back to work," I told Marcus. "We have a legacy to build." The deadline came and went without a word from either Robert or Patricia. I hadn't really expected them to give in so easily. The Andersons had spent generations building their facade of respectability, and they wouldn't let it crumble without a fight. I was ready for whatever came next, or at least I thought I was. I spent the afternoon at the new restaurant location, reviewing plans with my design team. The space was finally taking shape, the bones of my vision emerging from the construction dust. The massive windows overlooking the harbor would soon be fitted with stained glass panels, casting rainbow shadows across the reclaimed wood floors. In my mind's eye, I could already see the finished space. Elegant but welcoming, sophisticated but unpretentious. Everything the Andersons weren't. Sophie burst into the construction site just as I was approving the final bar design. Her chef's whites were streaked with sauce stains, and her face was flushed with anger. "They're trying to freeze our accounts." My heart skipped a beat, but years of handling kitchen emergencies had taught me to keep my voice steady. "Explain." "I just got a call from our bank. Someone's challenging our business licenses, claiming we've violated health codes. They're trying to suspend our operating permits." Sophie ran a hand through her disheveled hair. "All 5 restaurants? Jenny, they're going after everything." I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus's number. He answered on the first ring. "I'm already on it," he said before I could speak. "Robert's cousin Gregory sits on the health department board. They've filed multiple complaints, all supposedly from anonymous concerned citizens." Of course they have. I closed my eyes, thinking fast. How long can they hold things up? Normally it could take weeks to sort out, but I could hear the satisfaction in Marcus's voice. "Remember Judge Wilson?" A memory surfaced. A quiet older woman who'd been eating alone at my first restaurant on Christmas Eve 3 years ago. I'd sat with her for a while, sharing stories and mulled wine. She'd become a regular after that, always sitting at the same corner table. "Her grandson works for the health department," Marcus continued. "She's already called him. The complaints will be reviewed and dismissed by end of business today." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. They're getting sloppy. Desperate people usually do. There was a rustle of papers on Marcus's end. "But this is just the beginning. You should expect." A commotion from the front of the restaurant cut him off. I looked up to see my contractor, John, arguing with 2 men in suits who were trying to force their way past him. "Ms. Mitchell," one of them called out, waving a handful of papers. "We have a stop work order for this site." "I'll call you." "Back," I told Marcus, then turned to Sophie. "Get everyone out through the back. Make sure they take photos of exactly where they left their work." As my team quickly but efficiently began clearing out, I walked toward the front, straightening my spine with each step. Up close, I recognized one of the men, Richard Hayes, a building inspector who'd been in Patricia's pocket for years. "Mr. Hayes," I said coolly, "what an unexpected pleasure. I wasn't aware this building was due for inspection." Hayes had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable as he thrust the papers at me. "We've received reports of potential structural issues. All work has to stop immediately pending a full investigation." I took the documents, noting how his hand trembled slightly. "Structural issues? In a building that passed inspection just 3 weeks ago? How fascinating." I made a show of examining the papers. "And who filed these reports?" "That's confidential information," the second man cut in. I didn't recognize him, but his 2-new suit and nervous energy screamed junior. "Associate." Really?" I pulled out my phone and started recording. "So you won't mind if I document this visit? For the property insurance, of course." I smiled as both men shifted uneasily. "And I'm sure you have photos and documentation of these alleged structural issues?" "We're not required to," Hayes began, but I cut him off. "Actually, according to City Ordinance 47-3, you are required to provide specific documentation of any issues before issuing a stop work order. I'd hate to have to call Commissioner Martinez about this. She takes code violations very seriously. On both sides of the clipboard." The younger man's eyes widened at the commissioner's name. He tugged at Hayes' sleeve. "Maybe we should double-check the paperwork." Hayes shook him off, his face reddening. "Now listen here." "No. You listen." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "I know Patricia Anderson is behind this. I know about the envelope of cash she slips you every Christmas. I know about the vacation home in Maine that you somehow afford on a city inspector's salary." I watched the color drain from his face. "Walk away now, and maybe I won't have to share that information with Commissioner Martinez." For a moment, I thought Hayes might argue. but then his shoulders slumped, and he snatched the stop work order back from my hands. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Actually, it is." I held up my still recording phone. "If I see you anywhere near my properties again, this video goes straight to the commissioner, along with some very interesting financial records." I waited until they were gone before letting out a shaky breath. Sophie emerged from the back, followed by my construction team. "That was amazing," she said, "but they'll try something else. Count on it." I turned to John. "Double security on the site. I want cameras everywhere and someone here 24/7. If anyone tries to access this building without proper clearance, call the police immediately." My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "Turn on the news, now." I pulled up the local news stations, live stream on my phone, Sophie peering over my shoulder. Patricia Anderson's perfectly coiffed hair filled the screen as she stood at a podium, crocodile tears glistening in her eyes. "As a mother," she was saying, her voice trembling artfully, "it breaks my heart to see how money and success can change a person. My son's wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, has made terrible accusations against our family, all because she's angry about the end of her marriage." The camera pulled back to show Robert standing beside her, looking appropriately somber in a conservative, dark suit. Patricia continued, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "The Andersons have been pillars of this community for generations. We've provided jobs, supported charities, helped build this great city. And now, because one woman can't accept that my son's heart has led him in a new direction, she's trying to destroy everything we've worked for." I felt my blood begin to boil as Patricia launched into a clearly rehearsed speech about family, values, and the dangers of letting nouveau riche upstarts into respected social circles. But before I could react, my phone lit up with another call, this time from an unlisted number. "Ms. Mitchell?" a woman's voice said when I answered. "My name is Diana Porter. I'm a reporter with the Boston Globe. We'd love to get your response to Patricia Anderson's press conference." I closed my eyes, thinking fast. This was both a threat and an opportunity. "Actually, Ms. Porter, I think it's time someone told the real story. Are you free to meet?" An hour later, I sat across from Diana in my original restaurant's private dining room. She was younger than I'd expected, but her sharp eyes and quick questions revealed an experienced journalist's instincts. "Mrs. Anderson paints quite a picture," Diana said, reviewing her notes. "The grieving mother, the heartbroken son, the vengeful daughter-in-law." "It's an impressive performance," I agreed, sipping my water. But I noticed she didn't address any of the actual evidence. Diana's pen paused above her notebook. "Evidence?" I nodded to Sophie, who had been quietly standing by. She placed a thick folder on the table between us. "Everything's in there. Emails, photos, financial records, witness statements. The complete story of how Robert and Patricia Anderson tried to destroy my business when they realized I wouldn't just quietly accept their betrayal." Diana opened the folder, her eyes widening as she scanned the first few pages. "This is extensive. I believe in being thorough." I watched as she discovered the photos of Robert with Rebecca, the emails about the sabotage attempt, the documentation of the real estate fraud. "You'll find everything's authenticated. My lawyer can provide additional verification." "This would destroy them," Diana said quietly, looking up from the folder. "They tried to destroy me first." I leaned forward. "But this isn't about revenge. It's about truth. About showing that in this city, old money and social status don't put you above the law." Diana was quiet for a moment, absorbing everything. Finally, she asked, "Why give this to me? The Globe isn't exactly known for taking down established families." "Because you have a reputation for fairness. And because 3 years ago, you wrote a piece about female entrepreneurs in Boston that actually focused on their business acumen, instead of their personal lives." I smiled. "I pay attention to bylines, Miss Porter." She closed the folder carefully. This will take time to verify, to do it right. Take all the time you need. The truth isn't going anywhere. I stood, up smoothing my skirt, and neither am I. After Diana left with the folder, Sophie turned to me. Are you sure about this? Once it's out there. It needs to be out there. I walked to the window, watching the afternoon light play on the harbor waters. They threw the first punch. With that press conference, they're trying to paint me as the villain of the story. Time to show Boston who the real villains are. My phone buzzed again, Amanda this time. You need to see this, she said when I answered. Rebecca's gone public. I quickly pulled up the local news website. There she was, the other woman, herself, standing in front of her Beacon Hill apartment building. She was prettier than I'd expected, in that polished, old-money way that Patricia had always wanted for me. But her eyes were red-rimmed, and her hands shook as she read from a prepared statement. I was manipulated, she was saying, her voice breaking. Patricia Anderson approached me months ago. She said her son was in an unhappy marriage, that they needed someone from the right background to help him move on. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I watched in stunned silence as Rebecca detailed how Patricia had orchestrated the entire affair, down to arranging accidental meetings and providing the apartment. When she finished, the reporters erupted with questions, but Rebecca was already being led away by a man I recognized, one of Marcus's junior partners. Did you know about this? I asked Sophie. She shook her head, looking as shocked as I felt. Marcus? Must be. I felt a grudging admiration for my lawyer's strategic thinking. He's making sure every possible weapon gets used. My phone was going crazy now, messages pouring in from what seemed like everyone in Boston. I ignored them all except for one, a simple text from Marcus. Turn on Channel 5. The scene that greeted me made my jaw drop. Robert was standing at another podium, this time alone. His earlier polish was gone, replaced by a haunted look I'd never seen before. My mother. He paused, swallowing hard. My mother has controlled my life for as long as I can remember. She chose my schools, my career, my social circle. She never approved of my marriage to Jennifer, but I was too weak to stand up to her. When she suggested the plan to humiliate Jennifer at our anniversary dinner, I went along with it. When she arranged the affair with Rebecca, I went along with that too. He looked directly into the camera, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw real emotion in his eyes. I've spent my life being Patricia Anderson's son instead of my own man. The fraud, the corruption, the attempts to destroy my wife's business. It was all my mother's plan, but I'm just as guilty because I helped her do it. I can't live with that guilt anymore. The press erupted with questions, but Robert was already walking away from the podium. The camera caught him briefly turning back to say one last thing. Jennifer, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. You deserved better. I sank into a chair, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. What just happened? Sophie was staring at her own phone in disbelief. Social media is exploding. Patricia's press conference backfired completely. Between Rebecca's confession and Robert turning on her, my phone rang again. Marcus. I assume you're watching? Did you plan this? Robert came to my office an hour ago. Said he was tired of living under his mother's thumb. Everything he said was his idea. I just made sure the right media outlets were there to cover it. I thought about the Robert I'd known for 10 years, the weak man who'd always done whatever his mother wanted. Do you believe him? I believe he sees which way the wind is blowing. Marcus's tone was dry. And I believe he'd rather be seen as a remorseful son than go down with his mother's ship. As if on cue, another news alert popped up on my phone. Patricia had been filmed trying to leave her home with several suitcases. only to find FBI agents waiting in her driveway. The video showed her being handcuffed and placed in a black SUV, still screaming about family loyalty and ungrateful children. "The SEC moved faster than expected," Marcus commented. "Apparently, some of her old friends decided to cooperate rather than go down with her." I watched the clip again, feeling no satisfaction at seeing my former mother-in-law's downfall. Just a profound weariness, and an equally profound sense of relief. "It's really over," I said quietly. "The legal battles are just beginning," Marcus reminded me. "But yes, in all the ways that matter, it's over. You won." I looked around my restaurant, my first real success, the place where I'd begun to believe in myself. Through the window, I could see the construction site of my newest venture. Beyond that, the Boston skyline stretched out under the late afternoon sun, full of possibilities. "No," I corrected him. "We haven't won yet, but we will." I stood up, straightening my shoulders. "I've got a restaurant to finish building." The next morning, Boston woke to find its social landscape dramatically altered. The Globe's front page carried Diana Porter's first article, a masterfully crafted piece that laid out the Anderson family's decades of corruption in excruciating detail. The online version included copies of damning emails and photographs, each one adding another nail to Patricia's coffin. I read the article from my home office, watching dawn break over the harbor through windows that no longer felt like they belonged to a shared space. The brownstone seemed larger now without Robert's presence, as if his departure had somehow expanded its dimensions. Or perhaps it was just that I could finally breathe freely within these walls. Amanda arrived early, armed with coffee and a stack of newspapers. "You're trending on Twitter," she announced, dropping into the leather armchair across from my desk. "People are calling you the Queen of Comebacks. There's even a hashtag." I set aside the Globe and picked up my coffee. "How bad is the fallout?" "Bad for the Andersons, amazing for you." She pulled up social media analytics on her tablet. "Your restaurant's reservation lists are completely full for the next 3 months. The waiting list for the new location's opening night is already over 1,000 people long." A notification popped up on my phone, an email from James Morrison, my supplier who Robert had tried to bribe. "Thought you'd want to see this?" his message read, followed by a forwarded email from Patricia Anderson dated just 2 days ago. I opened the attachment and felt my blood run cold. It was a detailed plan to sabotage my food supply chain, complete with suggested health code violations that could be planted in my kitchens. The email had been sent to several other suppliers as well, promising rewards for cooperation and threats for those who refused. "Send this to Marcus," I told Amanda, forwarding the email, "and call Sophie. We need to audit our entire supply chain immediately." Before Amanda could reply, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was from the same wealthy suburb where Patricia lived. I put it on speaker. "Jennifer Mitchell speaking." "Jenny, darling." The voice was instantly recognizable. Margaret Whitman, one of Patricia's closest friends and a prominent figure in Boston's charity circuit. I simply had to call. This whole situation with Patricia is just dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. I caught Amanda's eye and saw her already recording the call on her tablet. "Yes, it is rather unfortunate," I replied neutrally. "But, dear," Margaret continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "there might still be a way to smooth things over. Patricia has always been reasonable when approached the right way. Perhaps if you were to issue a statement clarifying that this has all been a terrible misunderstanding." "Are you asking me to lie to protect Patricia, Margaret?" There was a slight pause. "I'm simply suggesting that certain allegations, if withdrawn, might make this situation easier for everyone. The scandal is affecting so many innocent people." "Ah, you mean it's affecting your investment portfolio?" I cut in. "How much did you have in the waterfront development project, Margaret?" Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, the fake warmth was gone from her voice. "You're making a serious mistake, Jennifer. Patricia isn't the only one with influence in this city. There are many people who won't appreciate you disrupting the natural order of things." The natural order? I couldn't help but laugh. "You mean the old money families getting away with fraud while looking down on anyone who actually works for a living? That order? You'll regret this," Margaret snapped, then hung up. Amanda whistled low. "Well, that was subtle. Want me to add her to the watch list?" "Definitely." I stood up and walked to the window. Below, morning traffic was picking up along the harbor front. We need to be careful. Patricia's friends won't take her downfall lying down. My phone buzzed again. Another email, this time from an anonymous address. The subject line read, "You should see this." Inside was a video file and a short message. "Karma's coming." I hesitated before opening the video. When I did, my heart stopped for a moment. It was footage from 8 years ago, taken at one of my first restaurants. I recognized myself in the grainy security camera feed, arguing with a health inspector. The video had been edited to make it look like I was offering him a bribe. "They're getting desperate," Amanda said, watching over my shoulder. "The full video would show you were actually refusing his demand for a payoff. But they're hoping the edited version will go viral before we can prove that." I forwarded the email to Marcus. "See if he can trace the sender." The morning continued in a blur of calls and messages. More of Patricia's friends reached out, some with veiled threats, others with transparent attempts at manipulation. Each one was documented and added to our growing file of evidence. Around noon, Sophie arrived with news from the restaurants. "They're trying to poach our staff," she reported, pacing my office, "offering ridiculous salaries to jump ship. 3 of our servers have already quit." I thought about my team, the people who'd been with me since the food truck days, who'd worked countless late nights and early mornings to help build this dream. "Call a staff meeting at each location. I want to talk to everyone personally." The first meeting was at the original restaurant where it had all started. The dining room was packed with familiar faces: servers, cooks, dishwashers, hosts. Some had been with me for years, others just a few months, but all looked uncertain about what the future held. I stood before them, feeling the weight of their expectations. "I know you've all been approached with offers," I began. "Generous offers to leave and work elsewhere. I won't ask you to stay out of loyalty alone. You all have families to support, dreams to pursue." I paused, looking around the room. "But I will make you a promise. Everyone who stays with us through this crisis will receive an immediate 10% raise. When the new location opens, there will be opportunities for advancement, for profit sharing, for building something that belongs to all of us." The room erupted in murmurs. I held up my hand for silence. "I started with nothing, but a food truck and a dream. Everything we've built together. The Andersons and their friends think they can destroy us by throwing money around. Let's show them what real loyalty looks like." By the end of the day, not only had the staff exodus stopped, but former employees were calling to ask if they could come back. The tide was turning, but I knew better than to think the war was over. That evening, I met with Marcus at his office to review our strategy. The sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows across his desk as he laid out the latest developments. "The SEC investigation is expanding," he reported. "They're looking into every project the Andersons have touched in the last decade. Several of Patricia's old friends are already cooperating, trying to save themselves." "And Robert?" Marcus adjusted his glasses. "He's agreed to testify against his mother in exchange for a reduced sentence. His confession this afternoon was just the beginning." I thought about my soon-to-be ex-husband, about the weak man who'd finally found the courage to stand up to his mother, even if it was only to save himself. "What about the threats? Margaret Whitman and the others? We're documenting everything. But be careful. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. Patricia's social circle is facing financial ruin and public humiliation. They'll try anything to stop that from happening. As if to prove his point, my phone lit up with a news alert. Someone had leaked photos of me from college. Nothing scandalous, just typical college party shots. But the accompanying article tried to paint me as a wild party girl who'd schemed her way into the Anderson family. They're trying to control the narrative, Marcus observed. Make you look like the villain before the full story comes out. Then let's change the narrative. I pulled out my laptop and opened my email. I'm sending you a draft of an open letter I've written. I think it's time Boston heard my side of the story. The whole story. Marcus read through the letter slowly, nodding as he went. This is good. Very good. Personal enough to be compelling. Professional enough to be credible. When do you want to release it? Tomorrow morning. And I want to do more than just release it. I want to read it myself, on camera, from my first restaurant. Let people see the real me, not the caricature Patricia's friends are trying to create. He looked up from the letter. You know this? We'll escalate things. Patricia might be in custody, but she still has allies. I'm counting on it. I stood up and walked to his office window, looking out at the city I'd fought so hard to make my home. They want a war? Let's give them one. They'll never forget. Back at home that night, I sat in my kitchen now, not ours, and thought about how much had changed in just a few days. The marble countertops Robert had insisted on still gleamed in the soft lighting, but they no longer felt like symbols of his control over the space. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. You need to see the news now. I turned on the TV just in time to catch breaking news. The camera showed Patricia being led out of a police station in handcuffs, her designer suit wrinkled, her perfect hair in disarray. But it was the headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen that made me gasp. Anderson family matriarch allegedly attempted to arrange assault on former daughter-in-law. The reporter's voice filled my kitchen. Sources say Patricia Anderson attempted to hire someone to intimidate Jennifer Mitchell, the restaurateur whose revelations have rocked Boston's social elite. Mrs. Anderson allegedly made the attempt from custody, using her one phone call to contact a known associate. I turned off the TV, my hands shaking slightly. A text from Marcus appeared. Don't worry. She's being transferred to maximum security. No more phone calls. Another text, this one from Robert. I'm sorry. I had no idea she would go this far. I didn't reply to either message. Instead, I walked through my home, checking the security system Amanda had insisted on installing. Through each window, I could see the lights of Boston twinkling against the dark sky, unchanging despite the chaos unfolding beneath them. Tomorrow, I would release my letter. Tomorrow, I would continue the fight. But tonight, in this moment, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I'd done, taking on not just my husband and mother-in-law, but an entire social system that had existed for generations. I poured myself a glass of wine and settled into the window seat overlooking the harbor. The same view I'd looked at every night for 10 years, but somehow it seemed different now, clearer. Like the fog of pretense had finally lifted, leaving only truth behind. My phone buzzed one more time, Amanda sending over the final draft of my letter. I opened it and began to read, making sure every word was perfect. Tomorrow, Boston would hear my voice, unfiltered and unafraid. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. Dawn painted the Boston skyline in shades of gold as I prepared to share my story with the world. The original Harvest and Root restaurant was empty, except for a small camera crew, their equipment casting long shadows across the rustic wooden floors. I'd chosen this location deliberately, the place where my dreams had first taken root, before Robert, before Patricia, before everything changed. Diana Porter from The Globe sat across from me reviewing her notes one last time. The morning light caught the rim of her coffee cup, still untouched as she concentrated on preparation. Behind her, Amanda gave me a thumbs up while checking the eye, lighting with the camera team. "Remember," Diana said, looking up from her notebook, "this is your chance to tell your story unfiltered. No editing, no cuts. Live streaming straight to the Globe's website and picked up by major networks. Are you sure you're ready?" I smoothed my navy silk blouse, chosen carefully to project strength without ostentation. "I've been ready for this moment for 10 years. I just didn't know it until now." The red light on the camera blinked on and Diana began. "I'm here with Jennifer Mitchell, Boston restaurateur and soon-to-be ex-wife of Robert Anderson. Jennifer, thank you for speaking with us today." "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share the truth," I replied, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. "Let's start at the beginning," Diana suggested. "How did you meet Robert Anderson?" I smiled, remembering that day with perfect clarity. "Right here, actually. He came to my food truck during its first week of operation. It was pouring rain, and he'd forgotten his umbrella. I offered him shelter while he waited for his driver." "Love at first sight?" "More like ambition at first sight, on both our parts." I traced the grain of the wooden table with my finger. I saw a chance to expand my business into the upper echelons of Boston society. He saw someone he could mold into the perfect society wife while taking credit for my success. The interview continued, covering everything from our whirlwind courtship to the gradual revelation of the Andersons' true nature. I spoke about the subtle manipulation, the constant undermining, the way Patricia had worked to isolate me from my own family and friends. "But you didn't break," Diana observed. "You built your restaurant empire despite their interference." "Because of their interference, in a way," I corrected. "Every time they tried to hold me back, it just made me more determined to succeed. What they saw as proper society wife behavior, I saw as chains. So I built something they couldn't control." Just then, a commotion erupted outside the restaurant. Through the windows, I could see a group of protesters gathering, holding signs with slogans like "Home Wrecker" and "Gold Digger." I recognized several faces from Patricia's social circle. Diana glanced at the windows, then back at me. "Would you like to take a break?" "No." I straightened in my chair. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. They're still trying to control the narrative, to paint me as the villain. But I'm done letting them write my story." I turned slightly to face the camera directly. "To everyone watching, especially those who've ever felt trapped by other people's expectations, your value isn't determined by those who try to diminish you. Your worth isn't measured by their standards." The protest outside grew louder, but I kept speaking. "The Andersons represent an old way of thinking, where power is inherited rather than earned, where appearances matter more than integrity. That world is ending, and they know it. That's why they're fighting so hard to maintain control." My phone buzzed on the table, a message from Marcus. I glanced at it quickly. "Emergency. Channel 7 now." Amanda was already pulling up the local news on her tablet. The headline made my blood run cold. "Anderson Family Charity Foundation announces immediate dissolution. Thousands of Boston children affected." Diana saw it too. "Your response to this development?" I took a deep breath, fury building inside me. This is a perfect example of their tactics. They're trying to punish the entire city for my defiance, threatening children's programs to pressure me into backing down. I looked directly into the camera again. It won't work. Reaching for my phone, I dialed Sophie's number. "Are you watching the news?" "Already on it," she replied. "The staff wants to help. They're offering to donate a percentage of their tips to keep the programs running." Warmth spread through my chest at my team's generosity. "Tell them thank you, but that won't be necessary." I turned back to the camera. "I'm announcing the creation of the Harvest and Root Community Foundation. We'll be taking over all the children's programs previously funded by the Anderson Foundation, with expanded services and additional resources. Diana's eyebrows rose. That's a significant financial commitment. It's not just financial. I'm pledging 25% of all our restaurant's profits to support these programs permanently, not as a tax write-off or a social power play, but because it's the right thing to do. The protesters outside had gone quiet, probably checking their phones as the news spread. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at them. You see, Patricia never understood something fundamental about success. It's not about how much you can take. It's about how much you can give back. One by one, the protesters began to disperse, their signs drooping as they hurried away from the cameras that had gathered to film them. But I wasn't done yet. The Anderson Foundation used charity as a weapon, withholding or granting funds based on social compliance. That ends today. Our foundation will be transparent, accountable, and focused solely on helping those in need. My phone lit up with a call from Marcus. Jenny, Robert's asking to make a statement supporting the new foundation. Says he'll pledge his personal inheritance to help fund it. I considered for a moment. Put him on speaker. Robert's voice filled the room, picked up clearly by the interview microphones. Jenny, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I want to help. Mother's actions, this latest move, it's unforgivable. Let me do this one good thing. Diana leaned forward, her journalist's instinct sensing a crucial moment. I looked at the camera, then at the empty restaurant around me, the place where both my business and my marriage had begun. Robert, I said carefully, why now? There was a long pause. Because you were right about everything. About Mother. About our world. About me. I've spent my whole life being exactly who she wanted me to be. I want to spend whatever time I have left being someone I can actually respect. The sincerity in his voice surprised me. You understand this isn't forgiveness? I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to help fix what my family broke. I thought about the children who would be hurt by the foundation's dissolution, about the real people behind the power plays. All right, but everything goes through Marcus. One hint of manipulation and it all stops. Understood. He paused. Again. And Jenny? I truly am sorry. After he hung up, Diana asked, Do you believe him? I believe he's finally making his own choices, I replied. Whether they're the right ones remains to be seen. The interview continued for another hour, covering everything from the business sabotage attempts to Patricia's latest desperate moves. Throughout it all, I could feel my strength growing, my voice becoming more certain. This wasn't just about my story anymore. It was about challenging a system that had gone unchecked for too long. As the camera crew packed up their equipment, Amanda showed me the social media response. The hashtag #OurHarvestAndHope was trending, with thousands of people sharing their own stories of standing up to privilege and corruption. You've started something bigger than the Andersons, Diana observed, gathering her notes. This is resonating with people far beyond Boston. Good, I said, walking her to the door. Maybe it's time for things to change everywhere. Outside, the morning had bloomed into a perfect autumn day. The protesters were gone, replaced by regular customers already lining up for lunch service. Several smiled and waved when they saw me, a few even applauding. Sophie appeared at my side, chef's whites already dusted with flour. Ready to get back to work? The kitchen won't run itself. I looked at my restaurant, at my team, at the city stretching out before me. Actually, I need to make one more stop first. The drive to the construction site of my newest restaurant took longer than usual, Boston traffic heavier than normal as people headed to work. When I arrived, the site was buzzing with activity. The exterior was nearly complete, the large windows finally installed, catching the late morning sun. John, my contractor, met me at the entrance. We're ahead of schedule, he reported proudly. All that drama with the building inspector actually helped, made the crew more determined to prove them wrong. I walked through the space, noting how much progress had been made. The bar was being installed, its deep mahogany gleaming under the work lights. The kitchen equipment had arrived, still in its protective wrapping but promising future feasts. Change of plans, I told John, surveying the main dining room. I want to add a community space, something we can use for cooking classes, job training, whatever the foundation needs. He pulled out his tablet, already making notes. We can reconfigure the private dining area, make it more flexible. Might push back the opening date a week or two. Do it. I walked to the windows looking out at the harbor. And I want to change the name. Oh. He looked up from his tablet. What were you thinking? I smiled, watching boats sail across the water, free and unburdened. Hope and harvest. Sometimes you have to plant hope before you can harvest change. My phone buzzed with another message from Marcus. Patricia's asking to see you. Says she has a proposition. I thought about the woman who had tried to destroy me, who was now facing the consequences of her own actions. Tell her I'll think about it. Because that's what freedom means, not just breaking free from control, but choosing when and how to engage with those who once held the power. I had all the time in the world to decide. Right now, I had a restaurant to build, a foundation to establish, and a future to create. The sun reached its zenith over Boston Harbor, casting no shadows. It was time for a new day to begin. The Suffolk County Detention Center looked nothing like I'd imagined. Instead of imposing stone walls and barbed wire, it was a modern building, of glass and steel, almost corporate in its appearance. The October wind whipped around me as I stood in the parking lot, debating one last time whether to go through with this meeting. Marcus waited by his car, his expression carefully neutral. You don't have to do this, he reminded me. Whatever game Patricia's playing, you've already won. That's exactly why I need to do it, I replied, straightening my blazer. She needs to understand that she has no power over me anymore. The security screening took 15 minutes. Fingerprinting, metal detectors, multiple ID checks. The guard who escorted us through the facility kept sneaking glances at me, probably recognizing me from the news coverage that had dominated Boston media for the past week. Finally, we reached a small conference room. Through the reinforced glass window, I could see Patricia already seated inside. Her designer suit had been replaced by a standard-issue jumpsuit, but she still managed to maintain an air of aristocratic disdain until she saw me. For just a moment, her mask slipped, revealing something that looked almost like fear. Remember, Marcus murmured as the guard unlocked the door. Everything she says is being recorded. Don't let her provoke you into saying anything that could be used against you later. I nodded, then stepped into the room. Patricia's eyes followed me as I took the seat across from her, noting the precise way I arranged myself, the confident set of my shoulders. I'd learned those mannerisms from her, ironically enough. Jennifer. Her voice was hoarse, lacking its usual imperial tone. Thank you for coming. I almost didn't, I replied honestly. After your attempt to have me attacked, I considered declining the invitation. She flinched slightly at the directness. That was a momentary lapse in judgment. I was desperate. You were arrogant, I corrected. You thought your social position would protect you from consequences. How's that working out? Patricia's hands clenched on the table between us. The perfectly manicured nails I remembered had been reduced to plain, short fingernails. I assume you didn't come here just to gloat. No, I came to hear this proposition of yours. Though I have to warn you, if it involves any threats or manipulation, this conversation ends immediately. She was quiet for a moment, studying me with those sharp eyes that had once made me so nervous at family dinners. You've changed, she finally said. The Jennifer I knew would never have been, so direct. The Jennifer you knew was trying desperately to win your approval. I don't need that anymore. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. No, I suppose you don't. She straightened in her chair, some of her old authority returning. I want to make a deal. I'm listening. I'll plead guilty to all charges. No trial. No drawn-out legal battle. In exchange, I want you to help protect what's left of the Anderson legacy. I raised an eyebrow. The legacy you tried to destroy? The one you were willing to sacrifice children's programs to preserve? The legacy that goes back 6 generations, she snapped. The charitable works, the civic contributions, the fraud? I cut in. The corruption? The systematic exploitation of others for personal gain? Patricia's face flushed. You don't understand. Everything I did to protect our family's position in society, to ensure Robert had the future he deserved. And look how well that turned out. Your son is cooperating with prosecutors, your family name is in ruins, and you're sitting in a detention center trying to bargain with the woman you tried to destroy. Yes. The word exploded from her with unexpected force. Yes, I failed. Is that what you want to hear? I underestimated you, undervalued you, and now everything I spent my life building is gone. Are you satisfied? I studied her for a long moment. This woman who had terrorized me for a decade, who had orchestrated my public humiliation, who had tried to have me physically harmed. In her eyes, I could see the desperation of someone watching their world crumble. I don't want your satisfaction, Patricia. I want your understanding. This isn't about destroying the Anderson legacy. It's about transforming it into something worthy of preservation. She blinked, confusion crossing her face. What do you mean? I pulled out my tablet and opened a document I'd prepared. The Harvest and Root Community Foundation isn't just taking over your charitable programs. We're expanding them, making them more accessible, more transparent. The Anderson name can be part of that, not as controllers, but as contributors to real positive change. Patricia stared at the tablet as I slid it across the table. This is a chance for redemption, I finished. Not forgiveness. You haven't earned that. But an opportunity to be part of something genuine instead of just another power play. She picked up the tablet with trembling hands, scrolling through the proposal. I watched as her expression shifted from skepticism to surprise to something approaching respect. You've thought this through, she said finally. Every detail, every contingency. I learned from watching you, I replied. The difference is, I'm using those lessons to build something meaningful instead of maintaining a facade. Patricia set the tablet down carefully. And Robert? Where does he fit into this? That's up to him. He's made his choice to cooperate with authorities and support the foundation. His future actions will determine what role, if any, he has in its operations. A long silence filled the room as Patricia absorbed everything. Outside the window, I could see clouds gathering over Boston, promising rain. Finally, she looked up at me with eyes that seemed older, more tired than I'd ever seen them. You know, she said quietly, when Robert first brought you home, I thought you were just another social climber. Someone who saw our name as a stepping stone. I never imagined that I'd be the one to make the Anderson name mean something. Positive again? She actually laughed, a short, harsh sound. That you'd be stronger than all of us combined. She pushed the tablet back across the table. I'll sign whatever you need, make the deal with prosecutors. But I want one thing. In return. I'm not in a position to make deals about your criminal case, I reminded her. Not about the case. I want... She hesitated, vulnerability showing through her carefully maintained facade. I want to be kept informed about the Foundation's work. Not to interfere, just to know that something good is coming from all this. I considered her request, remembering all the times she'd used information as a weapon. But the woman sitting across from me now wasn't the same imperious figure who had orchestrated my downfall. She was simply a mother who had lost everything, trying to control everyone around her. Monthly reports, I offered. Through Marcus. Any attempt to use that information improperly ends the arrangement immediately. She nodded, relief flickering across her face. Thank you. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. Don't thank me yet. Actions matter more than words. Now, prove that you mean it. As I turned to leave, Patricia called out softly, Jennifer? I paused at the door. You would have made an excellent Anderson if we'd let you. I looked back at her, sitting there in her prison jumpsuit, stripped of all her social armor. No, Patricia, I made an excellent Mitchell. That was always enough. The rain had started by the time I emerged from the detention center. Marcus waited under the building's overhang, phone in hand. How did it go? Better than expected, I replied, watching the raindrops create patterns on the pavement. She's agreed to everything. Have your team draw up the paperwork. He studied my face carefully. Are you sure about this? Keeping any connection to the Andersons could be risky. Sometimes the biggest risk is not taking one at all. I pulled out my phone to check messages. Besides, transforming their legacy into something positive is the best revenge I could ask for. A text from Sophie lit up my screen. Emergency at the new location. Need you here now. The drive downtown took 20 minutes through the rain-slicked streets. When we arrived at the construction site, I could see a crowd gathered despite the weather. My heart sank, expecting more protesters or media circus. Instead, I found my entire staff, from all 5 restaurants, standing together under a hastily erected tent. Sophie stood at the front, grinning widely. What's going on? I asked, confused by the festive atmosphere. We heard about your meeting. With Patricia, Sophie explained, and we wanted to show you something. She gestured to John, my contractor, who pulled away a tarp covering the building's front entrance. There, newly installed above the door, was a sign I hadn't approved. Hope and Harvest Community Kitchen, where everyone has a seat at the table. The staff took up a collection, Sophie continued as I stared at the sign. Everyone contributed to create this space. It'll be open during off hours for cooking classes, job training, community meals, whatever the foundation needs. I felt tears prick at my eyes as I looked at my team, my real family, all beaming with pride in what they'd created. This was what legacy truly meant. Not maintaining appearances or controlling others, but building something meaningful together. There's more, Amanda called out, emerging from the crowd. She handed me a stack of papers. Job applications. From Anderson Foundation employees who want to join us. They believe in what we're doing. The rain continued to fall, but no one seemed to notice. In that moment, standing with my team, looking at the physical manifestation of everything we'd fought for, I felt a peace I'd never known in all my years of trying to fit into Patricia's world. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Robert. Just signed the plea deal. Everything goes to the foundation. Make it count. I looked up at the sign again, at the promise it represented. Oh, we will, I whispered. We definitely will. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to my office. Through the glass walls, I watched Rebecca pace the reception area, wringing her hands nervously. She looked different from her press conference appearance, less polished, more human. After letting her wait for precisely 10 minutes, I nodded to Marie to send her in. Jennifer, she started as soon as she crossed the threshold. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Actually, you're not even in the top 5. The morning sun streaming through the windows caught the emerald pendant at her throat, the one Robert had bought her, not knowing I had connections at every high-end jewelry store in Boston. That's a lovely necklace. Her hand flew to her throat, color flooding her cheeks. I can explain. No need. I kept my voice neutral as I sorted through the morning's contracts. I'm sure Patricia explained enough when she orchestrated this whole thing, though I have to admit I'm curious why you're wearing it now. Rebecca's composure cracked slightly. I didn't know where else to go. Everyone in my social circle has frozen me out. Patricia's friends are calling me a traitor for speaking to the press. Robert won't take my calls. And you thought coming to me would help? I set aside the contracts and really looked at her. The designer outfit couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or the slight tremor in her hands. I don't know what I thought. She slumped in the chair. Maybe that you'd understand what it's like to have your whole world turned upside down. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. The difference is, you chose to help destroy my world. I just chose to rebuild it stronger. Patricia said it would be simple, Rebecca burst out. Just a few arranged meetings, some flirtation. She said Robert was unhappy, that you were using him for his name and money. I never meant for it to go so far. And yet it did. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a file. Every meeting, every gift, every lie you both told. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Tears welled in her eyes. What do you want from me? Nothing. I closed the file. I don't want anything from you, Rebecca. That's what neither you nor Patricia ever understood. I never wanted their world, their approval, their validation. I built my own. Then why am I here? You tell me. You're the one who came to my office. She was quiet for a long moment, fingers still playing with the emerald pendant. Finally, she unclasped it and set it on my desk. I want to make it right, somehow. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with an urgent message from Sophie. Kitchen crisis at the Back Bay location. Need you ASAP. I stood up, gathering my things. Come with me. What? You want to make things right? Come see what real work looks like. The drive to the Back Bay restaurant was silent. Rebecca sat stiffly in the passenger seat, clearly uncomfortable in a world so far from her usual haunts. When we arrived, the kitchen was in controlled chaos. A burst pipe had flooded part of the prep area just hours before lunch service. Status. Report, I called out, rolling up my sleeves as I entered through the back door. Sophie emerged from the walk-in freezer, hair dusted with flour. Water's shut off, plumbers on the way, but we lost this morning's prep. Lunch service starts in 2 hours. I surveyed the scene, staff mopping up water, prep stations in disarray, the day's deliveries still waiting to be processed. Right. Everyone who's not cleaning, start prep. Sophie, reconfigure the menu to work with what we have. Rebecca? She jumped at being addressed. Yes? You wanted to make amends? Put this on. I tossed her an apron. Start washing vegetables. Maria, we'll show you how. For a moment, I thought she would refuse. But something in my expression must have convinced her because she slowly put on the apron and followed Maria to the sink. The next 2 hours were a blur of activity. I moved between stations, chopping vegetables, adjusting seasonings, coordinating, with the front of house about menu changes. Through it all, I kept one eye on Rebecca. To her credit, she didn't complain, even when Maria corrected her technique for the 3rd time. By the time we opened for lunch, the crisis had been managed. The revised menu was smaller, but still maintained our standards. The dining room filled quickly, our reputation for excellence drawing the usual crowd despite the setbacks. I found Rebecca in the break room, examining her manicure-ruined hands. Different from what you expected? She looked up, something like respect in her eyes. How do you do this every day? Because it matters. I sat down across from her. Every meal we serve, every customer we welcome, every employee we support, it all matters. It's real in a way that charity galas and social climbing never will be. I'm beginning to understand that. She flexed her fingers, wincing slightly. When Patricia approached me about Robert, she made it sound like a game. Like we were saving him from someone beneath his station. But watching you today? You realized station has nothing to do with worth? She nodded slowly. I've never actually worked before. Not really. Everything was always arranged, managed, handled by someone else. And now? Now I don't know who I am anymore. She met my eyes directly for the first time. How did you do it? Build all this from nothing? One day at a time, one decision at a time. I stood up, straightening my chef's coat. The foundation is always looking for volunteers, real ones, not social chairwomen who show up for photo ops. Understanding dawned on her face. You're offering me a chance to learn? I'm offering you a chance to earn your own redemption. Whether you take it is up to you. Before she could respond, Sophie appeared in the doorway. Jenny, Robert's here. My ex-husband stood awkwardly in the dining room, looking out of place in his expensive suit. When he saw Rebecca, his face went pale. I should go, Rebecca said quickly, removing her apron. Thank you, Jennifer, for everything. As she hurried past Robert without acknowledging him, I saw something shift in his expression. Regret. Perhaps, or just recognition of another bridge burned. You look different, he said when we were alone. I look like myself. I gestured to a quiet corner table. What brings you here? We sat down, the lunch service bustling around us. Robert fidgeted with his water glass, another sign of how far he'd fallen from his usual confident demeanor. The plea deal is done, he finally said. I'll serve 18 months, most likely in minimum security. After that. Well, that's why I'm here. Go on. I've been thinking about what you said about legacy, about building something real. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. I want to sign over my share of the Anderson properties to the foundation. All of them. I opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. These properties are worth millions. They're worth nothing if they're built on corruption. He ran a hand through his hair. Another gesture I'd never seen from him before. I've spent my whole life taking credit for other people's work. Maybe it's time to actually contribute something worthwhile. I studied him carefully, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda, but all I saw was exhaustion and something that might have been hope. Why now? Because watching you today, how you handled the crisis, how you treated Rebecca of all people, I finally understood what Mother never could. True power isn't about controlling others. It's about empowering them. A memory surfaced. Our first date, when he'd seemed genuinely interested in my dreams for the food truck. Before Patricia's influence had reasserted itself. Before social expectations had smothered whatever genuine feelings might have existed between us. The foundation will put these properties to good use, I said finally. Job training programs, affordable housing, community spaces. I know. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. That's why I'm doing it. Everything I thought was important, social status, family name, maintaining appearances, it all feels hollow now. Prison has a way of changing perspectives. It wasn't prison. He met my eyes steadily. It was watching you stand up at that anniversary dinner, refusing to be broken by our games. You showed me what real strength looks like. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Sophie about the plumber's assessment. Real life didn't stop for emotional revelations. I need to handle this, I said, standing up. Have Marcus review the paperwork. If everything checks out, we'll proceed with the transfer. Robert stood as well, straightening his jacket in a gesture so familiar it almost hurt. Jennifer, I truly am sorry, for everything. I know. I looked around my restaurant, at the busy kitchen visible through the pass, at the satisfied customers enjoying their meals, at the staff working together like a well-oiled machine. But I'm not. Everything that happened led me here, and here is exactly where I'm supposed to be. After he left, I returned to the kitchen, rolling up my sleeves to help with the afternoon prep. Sophie appeared at my side, concern evident in her expression. "Are you okay?" I considered the question as I chopped herbs, the rhythmic motion soothing and familiar. "You know what? I really am. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I'm completely okay." The afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen windows, turning the rising steam golden. Another crisis managed, another challenge met, another step forward on a path that was entirely my own. In the distance, I could hear the construction sounds from the new restaurant site. Hope being built, harvest yet to come. Life wasn't perfect, but it was authentically, wonderfully mine, and that was worth everything. 3 weeks after Robert signed over the Anderson properties, I found myself standing in an unfamiliar kitchen. The space was vast, industrial, and completely outdated. Part of an old-school building that had been shuttered for years. Beside me, Sophie ran her hand along a stainless steel counter, grimacing at the layer of dust that came away on her fingers. "It needs work," she admitted, "but think of the potential. We could train dozens of students at a time here." I walked the perimeter of the kitchen, noting the ancient ovens, the scarred prep tables, the institutional fluorescent lighting that cast everything in a sickly glow. This was one of the properties Robert had transferred to the foundation, a former vocational school in a neighborhood that had seen better days. "How long to get it operational?" I asked, already making mental calculations. Amanda consulted her tablet. 3 months minimum. The electrical needs a complete overhaul, plumbing's shot, and don't even get me started on the ventilation system. Make it 2 months. I stopped at a window overlooking the school's overgrown courtyard. Winter's coming. People need jobs, training, opportunities. We can't wait for perfect conditions. A noise at the door made us all turn. Rebecca stood there, looking uncertain in jeans and a simple sweater, a far cry from her usual designer wardrobe. She'd been volunteering at our original location for the past 2 weeks, showing up every morning ready to work. "Sorry I'm late," she said, stepping carefully around a pile of debris. Traffic was terrible on Beacon Street. I nodded toward a stack of blueprints on one of the prep tables. "What do you think about this space? You've been working in our kitchens. You know what's needed." Surprise flickered across her face at being asked for input, but she moved to study the plans. After a moment, she spoke hesitantly. "The layout's inefficient. If we move the prep stations here," she pointed to a section of the blueprint, "and created a teaching area with demonstration stations along this wall." "Go on," I encouraged, watching her confidence grow as she outlined her ideas. "We could set up different stations for different skill levels. Basic knife skills here, advanced techniques there. Maybe even a pastry section in that corner where the light's better." Sophie was nodding along, adding her own suggestions. I let them work, moving to check my phone as it buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Meeting with the board in an hour. Important development." The foundation's board meeting room was another world entirely, all polished mahogany and leather chairs, housed in a downtown office building that still bore the Anderson name on its directory. Most of the board members were new, chosen for their expertise rather than their social connections, but a few familiar faces remained. Margaret Whitman sat at the far end of the table, her earlier hostility replaced by a careful neutrality. She'd survived the Anderson family's downfall by quickly distancing herself from Patricia and throwing her considerable influence behind the foundation's new direction. Whether her change of heart was genuine remained to be seen. Marcus stood at the head of the table, shuffling through papers as the last members took their seats. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. We've received an interesting proposal. that requires immediate attention. He clicked a remote, and an image appeared on the screen behind him, the logo of one of Boston's largest restaurant groups. Berkshire Hospitality Group wants to partner with us. They're offering to fund the culinary training program in exchange for first consideration of graduates for their establishments. The room erupted in murmurs. Berkshire was a major player in the industry, known for their high-end restaurants and exclusive catering contracts. A partnership with them would give our program instant credibility. "What's the catch?" I asked, knowing there had to be one. Marcus clicked to the next slide. They want naming rights. The school would be called the Berkshire Culinary Academy, with the foundation's involvement listed as secondary. Absolutely not. The words came out sharper than I intended, drawing all eyes to me. This program isn't about corporate branding. It's about giving people real opportunities. "Ms. Mitchell," Margaret spoke up, her voice smooth as silk. "Perhaps we should consider the practical benefits. Berkshire's resources could help us reach more students, provide better equipment." Like the practical benefits of partnering with Patricia? I met her gaze steadily. This foundation exists to help people, not to serve corporate interests. "Then how do you suggest we fund the program?" Another board member, a former Anderson associate who'd managed to avoid indictment, leaned forward. "The renovations? Alone will cost millions." I stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the city. Below, lunch crowds hurried along the sidewalks, many likely heading to one of my restaurants, or, yes, one of Berkshire's establishments. 10 years ago, I started with a food truck and a dream," I said, turning back to face the board. "Everyone told me I needed investors, corporate backing, someone else's name and money to succeed. But I did it my way, built it myself, kept control of my own vision." I moved to the screen, switching it to show photos of the old-school kitchen. "This program will succeed the same way. We'll start small, focus on quality over quantity. Every student will learn not just cooking skills, but business management, financial literacy, everything they need to build their own success." "And the funding?" Margaret pressed. "Is already secured." I nodded to Amanda, who distributed folders. To each board member, the foundation's existing resources, combined with revenue from the Anderson properties and contributions from my restaurant group, give us more than enough to launch the program properly. The board members flipped through the detailed financial projections, murmuring amongst themselves. Finally, Marcus spoke up. "It seems you've thought this through thoroughly." "I have." I returned to my seat, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. This foundation isn't about quick fixes or corporate partnerships. It's about sustainable change, about giving people the tools to build their own futures. Margaret set down her folder, a curious expression on her face. "You really believe in this, don't you? It's not just about proving something to the Andersons anymore." It never was. I met each board member's gaze in turn. This is about creating real opportunities, real change, not just in the culinary world, but in how we think about success and who deserves a chance to achieve it. The vote that followed was unanimous. Berkshire's offer would be politely declined, and the program would proceed according to my vision. As the board members filed out, Margaret lingered behind. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "When all this started, I thought, you were just another social climber who got lucky. I was wrong." "Yes, you were." I gathered my papers, not looking up. "But you have a chance to be part of something meaningful now. Don't waste it." Back at the school site that afternoon, I found Rebecca and Sophie still working on the kitchen. Plans. They'd moved from the blueprints to actually clearing debris, sleeves rolled up and hands dirty. "The board approved everything," I announced, setting down my briefcase. "We start renovations next week." Sophie whooped with joy, but Rebecca looked thoughtful. I heard about the Berkshire offer, she said. My father sits on their board. He thought it was a sure thing. Nothing's sure except what we make happen ourselves. I picked up a broom and joined them in their cleanup efforts. Speaking of which, how are you finding the work? Rebecca paused in her sweeping, considering the question seriously. It's hard. Harder than anything I've ever done, but she looked around the dusty kitchen, a small smile forming. It feels real, like I'm finally doing something that matters. Good. I nodded toward the blueprint table. Because I want you to help coordinate the renovation. You've got an eye for design, and you know what a working kitchen needs now. Think you can handle it? The look of surprised joy on her face was answer enough. As she and Sophie dove back into planning discussions, I stepped into the courtyard for a moment of quiet reflection. The autumn air was turning crisp, carrying the first hints of winter. In the distance, I could see the spires of downtown Boston, where my restaurants hummed with lunch service. Closer, the neighborhood around the school showed signs of life. Children playing in a nearby park, local shops doing steady business, community gardens brightening vacant lots. My phone buzzed with a message from the detention center. Patricia requesting another meeting. I marked it as read, but didn't respond. Some chapters needed to stay closed while new ones opened. A commotion from inside drew my attention. Rebecca had discovered another room behind the kitchen, a small cafe space that had once served as a training restaurant for the vocational students. Through the dusty windows, I could see her gesturing excitedly, already envisioning its potential. I smiled, remembering my own excitement when I'd first seen the space that would become my original restaurant. Dreams had a way of growing, evolving, becoming something bigger than initially imagined. What had started as my personal revenge against the Andersons was transforming into something far more meaningful, a chance to help others write their own success stories. The sun emerged from behind a cloud, streaming through the courtyard's overgrown trees. Soon this space would be alive with activity, filled with people learning, growing, building their futures. The harvest would come, but first, we had hope to plant. I rolled up my sleeves and went back inside. There was work to be done. Time has a way of changing perspectives. As winter descended on Boston, coating the harbor in crystalline frost, I found myself facing unexpected emotional territory. The morning brought news I never thought would affect me. Robert's sentencing date had been set. Despite everything, a small knot formed in my stomach when Marcus delivered the information. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows of my newest restaurant, now just days away from opening. The space had transformed from a construction site into something magical. Warm wood tones, subtle lighting, and floor-to-ceiling windows that would soon offer diners stunning views of the harbor lights. Sophie found me there, standing in the sea. Empty dining room, lost in thought. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, setting down 2 cups of coffee on the nearest table. "Just thinking about time," I replied, accepting the offered cup. 6 months ago, I was preparing for what I thought would be a celebration of my marriage. Now look at all this. I gestured to the restaurant around us, but we both knew I meant more than just the physical space. Having second thoughts? No. The answer came quickly, firmly. Just reflecting. Robert's sentencing is next week. Sophie's expression softened with understanding. "Are you going?" Before I could answer, the front door chimed. Rebecca hurried in, her arms full of fabric samples for the banquettes. She'd thrown herself into the renovation project with surprising dedication, proving to have an excellent eye for design and an unexpected work ethic. "Jenny, you need to see these," she called out, then stopped short when she saw our expressions. "Oh, you heard about the sentencing." The 3 of us sat at what would soon be one of the restaurant's best tables, the late afternoon light painting the harbor in shades of gold and rose. Rebecca spread her fabric samples out but didn't speak about them, sensing the weight of the moment. "I should go," I finally said, tracing the rim of my coffee cup. Not for Robert, but for myself, to close that chapter properly. Want company? Sophie offered. Actually, I looked at Rebecca, who seemed suddenly very interested in her fabric swatches. I think Rebecca should come with me. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with surprise. Me? But why? Because you're part of this story too. And because I think you need closure as much as I do. The week leading up to the sentencing passed in a blur of activity. The new restaurant demanded constant attention, final inspections, staff training, menu tastings. The Foundation's culinary program was also taking shape, with the first class of students set to begin in the spring. The morning of the sentencing dawned clear and cold. I stood in front of my closet, considering what to wear to watch my ex-husband receive his prison sentence. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Rebecca met me at the courthouse steps, looking as uncertain as I felt. She'd chosen a simple black dress, appropriate but understated, nothing like the flashy designs she'd favored in her previous life. "Ready?" I asked as we climbed the steps together. "No," she admitted. "But then, I don't suppose anyone's ever really ready for something like this." The courtroom was packed with familiar faces, former business associates, society figures, journalists. Margaret Whitman sat near the front, her expression unreadable. A few rows behind her, I spotted James Morrison, my loyal supplier who had refused Robert's bribes. Robert himself looked smaller somehow in his dark suit, the confidence and privilege stripped away, leaving something almost vulnerable. When he saw Rebecca and me enter together, his eyes widened slightly, but he quickly looked away. The proceedings moved faster than I expected. Robert's lawyer spoke about cooperation with authorities, about remorse and rehabilitation. The prosecutor detailed the extent of the fraud, the manipulation, the attempts to destroy my business. Finally, the judge spoke, her voice carrying clear authority through the hushed courtroom. "Mr. Anderson, your crimes go beyond simple financial fraud. You betrayed not only the trust of your investors, but also your fundamental duties as a husband and business leader. Your actions demonstrate a pattern of moral corruption that this court cannot ignore." I watched Robert's shoulders slump slightly as she continued. "However, your cooperation with authorities and your efforts to make restitution through the Foundation will be taken into consideration." The sentence came down, 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Not the harshest possible punishment, but enough to send a message. As the gavel fell, I felt something shift inside me. Not triumph or satisfaction, just a quiet sense of completion. Rebecca's hand found mine, squeezing gently. When I looked at her, I saw tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For everything." "I know." I squeezed back before letting go. But look how far we've all come from that night. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered on the steps, hungry for comments. I paused at the top, Rebecca slightly behind me, and faced their cameras and microphones. "Ms. Mitchell, how do you feel about the sentence? What's next for the Foundation? Any comment on Patricia Anderson's upcoming trial?" I held up a hand for quiet. Justice has been served, but this was never about punishment. It was about truth, about standing up to corruption and manipulation. Now it's about moving forward, about creating opportunities for others to build their own success stories. A reporter called out, "And what about Ms. Kingston? How do you explain her presence here today?" Rebecca stepped forward before I could respond. "I'm here because Jennifer Mitchell taught me something invaluable. That redemption comes through actions, not words. The Foundation's work is about giving people second chances. I'm grateful to be one of them." The reporters erupted with more questions, but we were already moving down the steps. My phone buzzed with a message from Sophie. "Emergency at the new place. Need you both ASAP." We found the restaurant in apparent chaos. Every surface in the kitchen was covered with food, dozens of dishes in various stages of preparation. Sophie stood in the middle of it all, directing traffic like a conductor with her orchestra. "What's going on?" I asked, taking in the scene. "Surprise practice service," Sophie explained, grinning. "Thought you might need a distraction today. The whole staff volunteered to come in early. We're testing every item on the menu, plus some new ideas." For the next several hours, we lost ourselves in the familiar rhythm of a professional kitchen. Rebecca proved surprisingly adept at expediting, keeping track of orders and timing with natural efficiency. I moved from station to station, tasting, adjusting, teaching. As evening fell, we gathered around the long table we'd installed for staff meals. The harbor lights twinkled through the windows as we sampled dishes and shared critiques. Looking around at these faces, my team, my chosen family, I felt a profound sense of rightness. "A toast," Sophie proposed, raising her water glass. "To new beginnings." "To second chances," Rebecca added. "To building something real," I finished. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood alone in the dining room. Tomorrow, we'd begin final preparations for opening night. Next week, the first group of foundation students would tour their future training kitchen. Life was moving forward, growing, evolving. My phone lit up with a text from Robert. "Thank you for coming today. And thank you for helping Rebecca find her way. You've built something remarkable." I didn't respond, but I saved the message. Not because I needed his approval or validation, but as a reminder of how far I'd come from that woman who once sought those things so desperately. The harbor wind picked up, rattling the windows slightly. Winter was settling in, but spring would come. Seeds planted in darkness would reach for the light. Hope would grow into harvest, again and again. I turned off the lights and locked up, stepping out into the cold night air. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build and grow. But tonight, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be, standing on the foundation of my own strength, looking forward to whatever came next. 1 year had passed since that fateful anniversary dinner. Boston's winter had given way to spring, then summer, and now autumn, painted the city in brilliant shades of gold and crimson once again. Standing in the Garden of Hope and Harvest's culinary school, watching students tend to the herbs and vegetables they'd planted, I felt the weight of time's passage. The morning air carried a familiar crispness, reminding me of another October. Morning when I'd prepared for what I thought would be a celebration of marriage. Now I was preparing for a different kind of celebration, the graduation of our first class of culinary students. Sophie appeared beside me, clipboard in hand. "Everything's ready for tonight. The students have been practicing their dishes all morning. You should see what Maria's doing with local squash. It would make any 5-star restaurant proud." Maria had been one of our first students, a single mother who'd lost her job during the Anderson Company's collapse. Now she was already fielding job offers from top restaurants across the city, though I secretly hoped she'd accept the sous chef position we'd offered at our newest location. The sound of laughter drew my attention to the teaching kitchen's windows. Through the glass, I could see Rebecca leading a lesson on plating techniques. She'd found her calling in teaching, sharing not just culinary skills, but her own story of transformation. The students related to her in a way they never could to me. She was proof that anyone could reinvent themselves. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Patricia's appeal was denied. Thought you'd want to know." I stared at the message for a long moment, surprised by my lack of emotional response. Patricia's attempts to overturn her conviction had become background noise, hardly worth noting anymore. The woman who had once terrorized my life now seemed almost insignificant compared to the work we were doing. The foundation had grown beyond anything I'd initially imagined. What started as a culinary program had expanded to include business training, financial literacy courses, and support services for families in transition. The Anderson properties, once symbols of corruption, now housed community centers, affordable housing, and incubator spaces for small businesses. Amanda joined us in the garden, tablet in hand as always. The documentary crew is set up in the main kitchen. They want to do final interviews before the graduation ceremony. The Boston Globe had commissioned a documentary about the Foundation's first year, focusing on the stories of our students and the transformation of the Anderson legacy. I'd been hesitant at first, but the students had convinced me their stories needed to be told. Inside the teaching kitchen, the energy was electric. Students moved with confidence between stations, putting final touches on the dishes they'd serve at tonight's graduation dinner. Each graduate would prepare their signature dish, showcasing not just their culinary skills, but their personal journey. The documentary crew's cameras followed me as I moved through the kitchen, stopping to taste and offer encouragement. At Maria's station, I sampled her roasted squash dish, perfectly seasoned, beautifully presented, telling the story of her heritage through food. A year ago, I was cleaning offices at night while my kids slept at their grandmother's, Maria told the camera. Now I'm about to graduate, with a real career ahead of me. Ms. Mitchell didn't just teach us to cook, she taught us to believe in ourselves. In another corner, James, a former Anderson Company employee, was carefully plating his modern take on classic New England seafood. He'd lost everything when the company collapsed, but found a new passion in the kitchen. Working for the Andersons, it was all about appearances, he explained to the documentary team. Here, it's about substance, about creating something real with your own hands. The afternoon passed in a blur of preparations. As sunset approached, guests began arriving for the graduation ceremony and dinner. The teaching restaurant, once a dusty, abandoned space, now gleamed with warmth and possibility. Each table was set with herbs and vegetables from our garden, and the open kitchen allowed guests to watch the graduates prepare their dishes. I stood at the podium, looking out at the gathered crowd. Former Anderson associates sat next to community leaders, food critics next to family members. In the back, I spotted Robert's sister Emily, who had recently joined the Foundation's board after breaking ties with Patricia. 1 year ago, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room. This building was empty, its potential forgotten. But like the students graduating tonight, it just needed someone to believe in its possibilities. As I spoke, I caught sight of a familiar face slipping in through the side door, Margaret Whitman. She'd resigned from Boston's most prestigious charity boards to focus on actual charitable work, starting a mentorship program for women entrepreneurs. Tonight, we're celebrating more than culinary achievements. We're celebrating the power of transformation, the courage to rewrite your own story, the strength to build something new from the ashes of the old. The graduates stood proudly in their chef's whites, each one representing a different path to this moment. Maria with her children beaming in the front row, James supported by his elderly parents, Sarah, who'd fled an abusive marriage with nothing but determination to build a better life. These graduates proved that success isn't about who you know or what family you come from. It's about hard work, dedication, and the willingness to believe in yourself even when others don't. Rebecca caught my eye from her place among the teaching staff, giving me a subtle nod. She'd come so far from the society woman who'd been Patricia's willing pawn. Now she was helping others find their way, turning her own redemption story into inspiration. The dinner service that followed was a testament to everything we'd built. Each graduate presented their dish with pride, sharing the story behind their creation. The room filled with excited conversation, genuine appreciation, and the kind of warmth that no amount of social positioning could manufacture. Later, as the guests enjoyed dessert, Sophie pulled me aside. "There's someone who wants to see you." In the quiet of my office, I found an unexpected visitor, Judge Wilson, who'd presided over Robert's sentencing. She'd become a quiet supporter of the foundation, often referring struggling individuals to our programs. "Quite a transformation," she said, gesturing to the framed photo on my wall, the original food truck where it all began. "Though I'm not just talking about the foundation." I smiled, understanding her meaning. Life has a way of revealing your true strength when you least expect it. Indeed. She settled into a chair, her judicial severity softening. "I've been doing this job for 30 years, seen every kind of case imaginable. But yours was different. You didn't just win a legal battle. You changed the entire narrative." Through the window, I could hear the sounds of celebration continuing in the main room. Music had started playing. Someone had convinced Maria to teach everyone. Salsa dancing. The Andersons spent generations building their empire on other people's dreams, I said, watching the dancers through the window. "We're building something different, a foundation for people to build their own dreams." "Speaking of the Andersons," Judge Wilson said carefully, "I received a letter from Patricia last week. She's requesting permission to participate in the Foundation's rehabilitation program after her release." The request surprised me less than it might have a year ago. "What did you tell her?" "That it would be up to you." She studied my face carefully. The old Patricia Anderson would never have asked. People do change if given the chance. I thought about the students graduating tonight, about Rebecca's transformation, about my own journey from that nervous young woman seeking approval to who I'd become. Have Marcus send me the paperwork, I decided. Everyone deserves a chance to rewrite their story. The judge smiled, standing to leave. "You've built something remarkable here, Jennifer. Not just the foundation or the restaurants, but a new way of thinking about success and second chances." After she left, I returned to the graduation celebration. The formal dinner had evolved into a joyous party. Students and guests mingled freely, sharing stories and dreams. In one corner, Margaret Whitman was deep in conversation with Maria about her business plan for a food truck. Near the kitchen, Rebecca was teaching James's parents the finer points of wine pairing. Sophie found me watching the scene. "Penny for your thoughts?" "Just thinking about that anniversary dinner," I admitted. "How something meant to break me ended up being the key to everything we've built." "Would you change it? If you could go back?" I considered the question, watching Sarah twirl her young daughter through a dance move, both of them laughing with pure joy. Not a single moment. Every step led here. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from Robert. "Saw the Foundation's latest report. You've accomplished more in a year than the Anderson family did in generations. Thank you for showing me what real legacy looks like." I slipped the phone back into my pocket without replying. His approval, like Patricia's manipulations and Boston society's judgment, no longer held any power over me. My worth wasn't measured in their validation, but in the lives we were helping to transform. The celebration continued late into the night. One by one, the graduates said their goodbyes, heading home to prepare for their first days in new jobs or to work on business plans for their own ventures. The teaching kitchen, which had seen so many transformations over the past year, slowly quieted. In the garden, the autumn air had turned crisp again. Stars peeked through breaks in the city's light pollution, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed midnight. A new day beginning, full of possibilities. I touched the rough bark of the young apple tree we'd planted when the school opened, a symbol of growth, patience, and the sweet rewards of hard work. Its branches were already reaching skyward, strong and sure of its purpose. Like the tree, like our graduates, like me, everything was exactly as it should be. Growing, changing, transforming, ready for whatever the next season might bring. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.